Well, let me pick up on the first of these four big ideas with that by way of an extended introduction to try and get you situated in terms of where Augustine was and what he was thinking. Ideas about natural law were common to Greek and Roman philosophies with which Augustine was familiar. Natural law is the assertion that all of our moral frameworks are to be measured against an objective morality. Greek and Roman philosophers, including Plato and Aristotle amongst the Greeks and Cicero and other Roman Stoics, thought that there were moral rules that could be discerned from nature. Augustine agreed. Just like the Apostle Paul, Augustine taught that knowledge of the eternal law is imprinted on the human heart. Now, Augustine had a great plan that he was going to write a commentary on the book of Romans. He got no further than the first 7 verses of chapter 1. But what he did manage to do was to provide expositions of various passages in Romans, including in Romans chapter 2, verses 14 and 15, where Paul writes about how, when the Gentiles who do not have the law do by nature the things contained in the law, they are a law unto themselves, which shows the works of the law written in their hearts. And Augustine took from this the idea that the moral principles at the heart of the law of Moses, the 10 Commandments and so on, are applied to everyone, whether they are Jewish or not. Now, that is not too far away from the claim that Roman law made. Roman law claimed that the ideas, the rules it applied to the peoples it had conquered were the natural law, which should have applied in any event. So Roman Empire says, this is the way society ought to be organised. We in Rome have worked it out. We've identified the moral principles at the heart of the universe, and we're now going to apply them as part of our generous gift to you, our conquered subjects, giving you the natural law in Roman form. It applied the natural law through what Roman lawyers called the jus gentium, the law of the peoples, which contained the natural law as well as the rules accepted by all civilized people everywhere, with one exception. The only exception was the law of slavery. The Romans recognized that slavery was contrary to the natural law, but they said, since every civilized society has slaves, we're going to apply that on the basis that it is universally accepted. See, one of the big claims of the Roman Empire for the virtues of its rule, one of the big reasons it gave as to why you ought to be really pleased that the Romans had just arrived in town, was that as well as the decent food and wine that they were going to give you, they were going to give you the best reflection and instantiation of natural law in the Roman law that was now going to govern you. Now, Augustine is thoroughly steeped in this kind of philosophical tradition. He trained in rhetoric. He was looking seriously at going into politics. He understood this mindset from the inside. And yet, although he accepted and affirmed the universal application of biblical natural law, he rejected the claims of Roman law to give full effect to it. When you read The City of God today, one of the most striking things is how critical Augustine is of the Roman Empire. And not just of the Roman Empire under the pagan emperors, but the Roman Empire under the Christian emperors. You see, Augustine thought that the values that united the Roman Empire were glory and freedom. In the final analysis, those were the two things that the Romans loved most. But in Book 5 of The City of God, he says the Romans' love for their own freedom leads them to a sort of paranoia, where they think the only way in which we can be free is if nobody else has got the ability to harm us. And in order to make sure that nobody's got the ability to harm us, well, we need to conquer them. And now we've conquered them, we've got a new frontier, and there's some new people over there on the other side of the frontier, and they might have the ability to harm us. So what are we going to do? The only thing we can do to protect our own freedom is to conquer them as well. And so the Roman love for freedom becomes a desire to dominate others. He then turns to the Romans' attitude to glory and its relationship to justice. Early in Rome's history, when it was just a little town and didn't even have an empire, just starting out, there are lots of other states in Italy, Rome enters into a treaty with the Samnites. And then the Romans were approached by Campania, which the Samnites were threatening to attack. And according to Livy's account, the Romans listened to the Campanians, agreed to protect them, and then broke their treaty with the Samnites. And Augustine says this: the Romans did not love glory for the sake of justice. They seemed to love justice for the sake of glory. They broke the peace and the treaty that they had concluded with the Samnites. In the final analysis, the Romans didn't love justice in its own right. They only loved it instrumentally, as a means of promoting their glory. And when glory could be achieved more successfully by other means, they were prepared to abandon justice. Now, how does this idea of natural law play through today? Formally speaking, secular context will tell you that we don't believe in natural law anymore. The only trouble is we do. We just call it human rights law. Human rights law is the claim that there is an objective morality that is binding on all human beings and all lawmakers. It's just the modern contemporary version of natural law. Professor Julian Rivers says the Christian natural law tradition arguably reached its fulfillment in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and in the mid-20th century human rights movement more generally.